الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد الفاتح الخاتم الناصر الهادي وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. ما زلنا مع إمام أهل السنة إمام أحمد الإمام أحمد Ibn Hanbal. We are, Alhamdulillah, we still with our beautiful guest, Imam Ahl Sunnah. That is Imam Ahmad Ibn Hanbal. Hanbal is actually his grandfather. So his father was Mouhamed, but he is known as Ahmad Ibn Hanbal. Ahmad Ibn Mouhamed Ibn Hanbal Ibn Hilal Ibn Asad Ibn Idris Ibn Abdullah Ibn Hiyyan Ibn Abdullah Ibn Yunus Ibn Auf Ibn Qasid Ibn Mazin Ibn Shayban. He's from Banu Shayban, and Banu Shayban is a great Qabila from the Arabs. They say they are the first who overcome the strangers coming to try to colonize the Arabs. Ibn Zuhal, so he's Shaybani and Zuhali. And Zuhal, Banu Zuhal, they are very strong Qabila also. Ibn Ha'laba, Ibn Ikaba, Ibn Sa'ab, Ibn Ali, Ibn Bakr, Ibn Wa'il, Ibn Qasid, Ibn Hind, Ibn Afsa, Ibn Da'mi, Ibn Jadil, Ibn Asad, Ibn Rabi'a, Ibn Nizar. At Nizar, he meets with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is in lineage. Nizar Ibn Ma'ad Ibn Adnan. So he is from Adnan, from Ma'ad, from Nizar. And Nizar are a couple of children. One of them is Rabi'a. And Rabi'a, from him comes Sayyidina Imam Ahmad Ibn Hanbal, Rahmatullahi alayhi. And his mother also is from Banu Shayban. His mother was Safiya bint Maymuna bint Abd al-Malik ibn Suwada ibn Hind al-Shaybaniya. I begin with this title, Imam Ahl Sunnah, or Imam Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the leader of the people of Sunnah. This name or this laqab is given to many scholars, but during their lifetime. There was a time so and so is called Imam Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. But this name, if it is mentioned without mentioning any time, the only person whom people think, about whom people think, the only people our mind is going to lead us to is, the only person I would say, is Imam Ahmad Ibn Hanbal. That title is for him. Imam Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And there is a reason why, and we will talk today about that very reason why. Or there are reasons why. Number one, the way he memorized the hadith was very rare that you see a person memorizing such amount of hadith, knowing the authentic from what is not authentic, knowing it's at the same time the people of hadith, their history, their biography, whether they are authentic people, they are truthful people or no. He was Imam in Ilm al-Jarh wa Ta'dil. He was also Imam in Ilm al-Rijal. Abu Zar'a said that Ahmad ibn Hanbal memorized alf hadith. That means 1 million hadith. And you know the authentic hadith do not reach that number. But he even memorized the so-called hadith, the weak hadith, the fabricated hadith, the authentic hadith. Then he could know what is what. And he put together his book, Musnad, and in Musnad you have over 50,000 ahadith. That's why you can understand the saying of Imam Shafi'i. Imam al-Muzani rahmatullahi alayhi said that Imam Shafi'i once told me, رأيت ببغداد شابا إذا قال حدثنا قال الناس كلهم صدق. I saw a young man in Baghdad, whenever he says حدثنا, meaning he narrates hadith, everyone says he speaks the truth. Imam Shafi'i called him a young man because he was 14 years older than Imam Ahmad Ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad Ibn Hanbal was one of his students, his greatest student, of course. He also traveled the world, the Islamic world, from Baghdad to Africa, to Morocco, to Algeria, to seek knowledge. And most times he worked. He didn't have enough to ride. From Mecca to Yemen, he was so poor that he had to work for people in order to reach Yemen, because everything he had to travel to Yemen has finished. And when he arrived at Yemen, his Sheikh Abdul Razak As-San'ani, the Sheikh of Yemen at that time, knew that Imam Ahmad is here. He had nothing left for him. Imam San'ani himself, he once mentioned Imam Ahmad and he started crying. People told him why. He remembered this day. When Imam Ahmad came, he didn't have anything. And he took 10 dinars, that was wealth, that was a lot of money. And he proposed him to take it. He said, Ya Abu Bakr, لو قبلت شيئا من الناس قبلت منك. If I was to accept anything from people, you would be the first from whom I would be accepting. But he didn't want to take anything. Yahya ibn Ma'in, his companion, said that we, the students, we collected and we proposed to give him. He said no. And then he said, soon we saw him. He was making up something with his hands. He was very talented and he started selling it. And he went to people who used to carry things and carries for them so that they paid him. So he eats from his own sweat. He didn't want to eat from anyone. That was the izzah of Imam Ahmad Ibn Hanbal. You know, you could say he refused the wealth of the government, of the leaders, of the kings. But the sheikh, his own sheikh, one of the most pious people of his time, he didn't want to take from him. They say one day he was so hungry. For 3 days he didn't eat. He was in Baghdad for 3 days. He didn't eat. And he fainted. And when they knew about it, and they had some food there to prepare, but in a minute they prepared the food. You know, when he woke up, he asked, where did you get the food from? He said, we prepared it for you. He said, that fast? They said, because the tanur of Saleh was his son. He's how do you go when you bake something? That thing you tanur. What is tanur? Who speaks Arabic here? What is tanur? That's Sheikh. No, be like in English. I'm like you anyway. Huh? So it's the bakery machine that you oven. MashaAllah. Barakallahu lakum. They said to him, the oven of Saleh was working. So that's what we use. He said, Irfa'u, take it. Because Saleh accepted hadiyah, accepted donation from the government. And his own son. He said, it is because you used his oven, I'm not going to eat his food. And he said, put a wall between my house and the house of Saleh, so that you're not going to go there and use his items to make food for me. That's how Imam Ahmad was. He is the Imam of the Sunnah because all his lifetime was a life of study, of seeking knowledge. I told you what he said a couple of days ago. Ma'al mahbara ila al-maqbara. With the ink port to the cemetery, meaning seeking knowledge until death. Min al-mahdi ila al-lahd. And people would gather around him when he taught. Some narrations say that more than 5,000 people would be in his majlis when he taught. And the scholars say, "Lawla Ahmadu la sara an-nasu kulluhum mu'tazilin." That saying is very strong and powerful. If it was not for Ahmad, every Muslim would become Mu'tazili. Mu'tazili, what is Mu'tazili? In the time of Hassan al-Basri, he had a student by the name of Wasil ibn Ata. They were talking about in a mas'ala of Aqidah, and he protested, and he didn't come. I'tazal, meaning he went by himself. He sat by himself. That's where the word Mu'tazila comes. And because he believes that the Muslim that is disobedient to Allah is not to be called a Muslim, neither a Muslim nor a kafir. They tell him because he had these philosophical thoughts in him. So وَيَقُولُ بِمَنْزِلَ مِنْ مَنْزِلَتَيْنِ. And so they deny some of the attributes of Allah, many of the things that they have, in particular when it comes to Aqidah. So during the time of Ahmad Ibn Hanbal, that was the time when they had strength in the Khilafah. They influenced the Khilafah, the Dawla al-Abbasiyah. Because the Dawla al-Abbasiyah at first was in Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah. Even when Harun first heard about these big sayings of the Mu'tazilite, what was that sayings? They say that Quran is not the word of Allah, it's not the saying of Allah, but it is created by Allah. It's a creation of Allah, not the actual words of Allah. Harun al-Rashid, who was the Khalifa at that time, he said, if I reach Bishr, I'll kill him, because Bishr was the carrier of that saying. He was among the leaders of the Mu'tazila. But when Harun died, then the Dawla becomes under the hands of Amin. Then with Ma'mun, they got strong. In 2012, because in 212, sorry, before 212 was the Dawla of Amin, they started spreading that philosophy. And in the time of Ma'mun, they went even further than that, to the extent that they threatened every single scholar who opposed them, whether they would kill you or take you to prison during the time of Ma'mun. And Imam Ahmad Ibn Hanbal was the champion of that time, who was among the most respected people. You know, many scholars were in prison, many they backed up, you know, few they were resistant, but everybody was listening to what Imam Ahmad had to say. And he said no to them. And he took him to jail him. And by the time he arrived to see Ma'mun, where Ma'mun was, Ma'mun died, because he was mustajabu da'wah, his dua was accepted. He made dua, oh Allah, please, I don't want to see Ma'mun. And Ma'mun died before he arrived to see Ma'mun. But when Ma'mun died, he also left a word for his Khalifa, the one who would be the Khalifa after him. And that one, took Ahmad to prison. They took him to prison. That was the year 218 by Ishaq ibn Ibrahim al-Khuzai, who was the naib of Ma'mun that time. But then after Ma'mun, this continued by the brother of Ma'mun, who was the Khalifa, that is Mu'tasim. And they imprisoned him. They did harm to him very badly. One day they were striking him until he passed out. That's how much they tested him. And then bring him to debate with him, he would win. You know, because this philosophical thoughts has changed everything in the Khilafah. When Mu'tasim died, 227, in Wathiq, because they end up by letting him go because they couldn't do anything. That took him in prison. It took him to, 28 months in prison. They left him. But when Mu'tasim died and Wathiq came, he started again, forbidding Imam Ahmad to go to people or teach for more than 5 years, until Wathiq died and Mutawakkil came. And when Mutawakkil came, he is the one who ended everything. And he he came to the madhab of Ahlul Sunnah, and he supported Ahmad Ibn Hanbal.